Welcome back to the Collaborative IEP podcast. I am your host, Ashley Barlow, and I am so happy you're here. Hey, I just did it on the first try. Maybe it helps to start recording things at 10 o'clock at night. Um, okay, I'm excited about this one. So last week I shared with you um, a lesson on behavior, kind of like behavior 101 condensed version. And I promised that I could give you a little ditty. I could train you on a little ditty about behavior in 12 minutes or less. And you were like, oh, that was fun. I got lots of emails from you saying that you liked that podcast episode. So today I am here with my hair in a bun and my comfy sweatshirt on. Do you know that I wear navy blue and white stripes so often that I have friends that wear navy blue and white stripes and say that they're like dressed up as me. It's kind of like a uniform. And if it has a turtleneck, it's even more like a uniform. Anyway, I'm super comfy and I am getting 1,000 things ready because Griffin and I are leaving for a big, huge swim meet. And I've got lists and I've got everything. And one of the things I have to do is I have to do my nails. So I was like, oh, well, at first, I'll tell you that I was like, this is a good idea. I'm going to paint my nails and I'm going to teach something in the amount of time it takes me to paint my nails. But I am one of these people, I always say I'm a finisher. Like I don't do a super good job at things like painting my nails because I just want it done. And so now that I'm doing my own nails, which I haven't even told you, announcement, I'm doing my own nails. You don't care. I stopped getting them done because they were just wrecking them with that file thing. Anyway, so it's gonna take me longer to do my nails than it is to do this podcast. And I've probably lost you already. So thanks for sticking. But in shorter than the amount of time that it takes me to do my nails, I am going to talk to you about interoception or interoception, depending on how you say it. Okay. So we're talking about feelings here and we're talking about sensory processing. Okay. So before I start just talking, we're in the land of sensory processing and we are talking about one of the senses in sensory processing, which is about feelings. Okay. And we call it interoception. Interroception. Okay, nail strengthener going on. So what do we mean when we talk about interoception? Oh yeah, also the lighting is really weird if you're watching the YouTube, and that's because I'm legally blind, and I usually do this in my kitchen, which is kind of like a operating room because I have so many lights on in there. Okay, so um I have been talking about interoception a lot in meetings recently, actually, like for the last 2 or 3 years, because, um, I think, a big theme in, schools right now is that students are really struggling with coping skills, with behavior, with social emotional functioning, with stuff like that. And, I think we all say, "Oh, it's because of COVID." And certainly my experience with a lot of clients and with my own family is that COVID did impact those things for folks. It seems like most of my cases where this comes up is with pubescent boys. And so, are we looking at puberty and executive functioning? Or are we, it's like this big combo, right? So, um, I oftentimes am asking schools what they're doing about interoception. And normally, when I do this, I have had a really nice conversation with the family, and the family has said, yes, my child seems to have some struggles in the area of interoception. So I say to schools, what are we doing about interoception? And I usually get some kind of blank stare. And I'm like, oh, okay. They need a little ditty on interoception. So I'm like, okay, so I'm going to give you like the longer version. I can do this in 90 seconds. And sometimes I say, I need 90 seconds. Um, Well, here, let me do the 90-second thing for you. I'm waiting for that nail strengthener to just, like, kinda settle in. So 90 seconds is interoception is we're now thinking it's one of, the senses. In fact, I think they say, maybe like the 8th sense, right? So the 5 senses that we learn in kindergarten, and then vestibular, like spinning, inner ear stuff, and then proprioception, which is feeling your body in space. That's when our, like, sensory seekers have to crash into the crash pad or, um break the crayon. And then interoception is our ability to feel our feelings, to label our feelings, to access skills and strategies to ameliorate uncomfortable feelings, to identify the feelings of others, and to change our behavior in order to assimilate into this world with other people and their feelings. And if I say it like that, then usually the psychologist or whoever, is open to it is like, "Wow, that is really good." And I'm like, "Well, thank you. That is what I think interoception is in a nutshell," right? But I normally start off and say, I think interoception is something that is, like, kind of newer on the scene because I don't want for people on IEP teams to feel like we're cramming this new thing down their throats. And frankly, depending on where you are, social emotional learning, as I'm sure you know, can be somewhat triggering to some people. It's got, this political thing behind it, and that's unfortunate, but you've got to it's kind of like when, people are like, "Oh, it's just money." I'm like, "Well, good. I want to know that it's just money so that I can advocate around it." So if I, know that there is like a trigger around social emotional learning in a community, in a school with a particular person, that I'm going to change my language and my approach slightly in order to, see if we can find some common ground. So, because ultimately that's what we're talking about, right? We're talking about our emotions. Um, so I normally explain it that way. And I say, some people have a difficult time actually feeling their emotions or being able to, um, to describe them. Gosh, I really wish I could get right underneath this light, but I can't seem to find it. Um, and so I normally say, like, then so for example, my client has said that their child, now fill in the blank, like, if they are, angry, I'll say, "Wow, it seems like you're angry," and they'll say, like in my house, Jack says, "I am not angry." And you're like, "Oh, okay, you're not angry." That's about the most angry voice that I've ever heard, something like that. And so um, I normally, like, give a couple of examples of how it looks in the child. And then I say, and so imagine if you didn't know that you were stressed out or that you were anxious or that you were embarrassed or that you were tired. Oh, by the way, another thing when I talk to my clients is a lot of kids that struggle with this actually, like, only know 2 or 3 emotions. Like, they only know happy and sad. A lot of kids only know happy and sad. Now, they might have heard the word embarrassed, and they might even be able to say, like, embarrassed on a TV show or something like that, but they definitely cannot necessarily apply it to, real life scenarios, and they don't necessarily even think of embarrassed being in the same category as happy and sad. Like, everything is happy and sad. And so there's, like, this underdeveloped, sense of what feelings even are, right? And then to feel them. And so sometimes it is really, really basic. Like for Jack, he literally cannot we're happy if he tells us he's sweaty because he cannot feel like he is sweaty or he is for some people it's hungry and thirsty. Now Jack can always tell you if he's hungry. He's always hungry. So maybe he isn't. Um, but, like, hot, cold, any kind of discomfort and or positive feeling. Um, so I, it kinda give that information from the parent thing. And then I say, "So imagine if you had a feeling of discomfort and you weren't able to even tell anyone that that's how you were feeling because you yourself truly did not know. And so, with an interoception, what we have to do is we literally have to sometimes like teach children what the actual emotions are. And for some kids, we're stuck there. Now, normally, if we are in that spot, the teachers are like, okay, we can do that. And by the way, there's all kinds of resources for that. Like you can go on and like buy, books about emotions. There's Color Monster. There's things that go with zones of regulation, which is a really common curriculum that schools use. There is like one of my favorite ones that we have is we have this flip chart of emotions that helped us teach the vocabulary, like embarrassed and that kind of thing. And it has little situation like scenarios in it that helped us teach it. Um, and then, okay, so usually they're like, "All right, we can teach that. We totally get it." And like, here's how your body feels when you are happy. Here's how your body feels when you are sad. Here's how your body feels when you are angry, all of those things. Usually I get teachers to kind of buy into that. What's hard is when a kid kind of struggles then with what to do with their emotions. When the emotions are uncomfortable and they don't know what to do. And teachers are like, well, we teach them deep breathing. And you're like, well, I got to tell you, I don't have many kids at all on my caseload for whom deep breathing works. And maybe it's because they aren't taught deep breathing, and maybe it's because they can't access it in the moment when they are dysregulated, but they literally cannot do it. It does not help. And, if kids have um, what do we want to call it? Like self-awareness too, and then articulate the expressive language and all of the other skills to be able to talk to us about it, they'll say, yeah, that doesn't work. And you're like, okay. Now, deep breathing for me really does work. A nice belly breath really does work for me. And sometimes it's just one. So, I have anxiety. And so, I mean, it certainly is a research based coping strategy. But they always say that at schools, like, oh, well, we teach deep breathing. And you're like, is there anything else that they could do? Or even like box breathing or some other kind of breathing. Um, so we that is when they start to struggle because schools are like, "Well, what do you want us to teach them?" Right? Like, where do we stop? And so what I have tried to do is I have tried to get schools to think about this kind of like a BIP. When you are feeling, with a BIP, with a behavior intervention plan or a behavior support plan, if a certain behavior happens, or maybe even like a precursor to a behavior happens, then the child gets the same support every single time. So I have started to say, if a child is expressing a feeling of discomfort, then they should be offered this. And in a lot of cases, I want a coping um, skill and strategy little box. Like I want a little toolkit so that they can choose that they can breathe. And, they might need a little cue for their deep breathing. So they might need a little pinwheel to blow on, or there's like this cute little elephant craft where the trunk of the elephant goes kind of berserk and it's real cute. So they might need something like that. They might need um, something to keep their hands occupied, like a fidget of some sort. They might need a little walk. They might need music and an AirPod, whatever it is that they need. They might need language, like a language thing to just say, I'm uncomfortable or I need help or, something like that. So, I have been trying to say, if a child feels embarrassed often, then we need a strategy for embarrassment. If a child feels stressed about grades, often we need a strategy for stressed about grades, right? And that has been working really, really well for me. Another strategy that I use for interoception is I really try to infuse these conversations with empathy. So I really try to um, get schools to understand how the students are feeling. And the best way that I can do that is I get information from the parents about what's happening at home and in the community. Because I think when we have information about what's happening at home in the community, it translates pretty well to school, and the school people can be like, "Oh, that's when that's happening. That's happened here. It's just like what happens in the cafeteria," or something like that. And then we get better, kind of brainstorming that way. So then, of course, we always have to round out this conversation by talking about how interoception, this deficit or this struggle, really impacts our peer relationships and our relationships with parents. Because sometimes, I mean, most of the time, these kids are experiencing, some behavioral struggle or executive functioning struggle at school, and that's kind of why this has come up. And so, a lot of times the teachers say, "Well, how do you think that made Johnny feel when you pulled their hair or when you took their kickball on the playground?" And then they say, "Oh, I am so disappointed in you, little Billy. I can't believe that you have done that. And I only get 20 minutes for lunch and I gave you my entire lunch period." People do this to Jack all the time. And I'm like, "Listen, Jack doesn't feel his own feelings. So he does not understand your feelings. Not that that is a slight on you whatsoever, but he literally does not understand feelings. So when we turn and put it on ourselves, we're just dysregulating him more because he's got to pay attention to stuff that doesn't make any sense to him. And that's not to say that it's not something that we should work on, but we have to work on the foundational skills before we get to talking about other people. Um, and yes, it's an awkward, uncomfortable conversation to have, but it's hopeful. So we always have to turn this back around and talk about like what the schools want to talk about, which is how they treat other people, like the golden rule. Well, if we don't understand how we're feeling, it's really difficult to understand how other people are feeling. One last little word about this. It's 17 minutes. It's been a second, but I've given you a lot off the cuff while I'm painting my fingernails. Now I have two coats on my nails. Now I'm going to do a top coat and then I'm going to do a speed coat. So I'm still way faster than um, what it took to paint my nails. Although I am admittedly faster in my kitchen where I can actually see. I might go outside and be like, "That this was a bad, bad experiment, and I should start over." I'm also like, can you tell how calm I am? This is my calm, crafting kind of voice. This is how I talk when I'm concentrating on something. You're just never get to see this side of me. Do you know one time I wrote an easement for a friend, and as I was, like, explaining something on it, she told me that I sounded really smart when I was a lawyer, and I was like, "Well, I'm always a lawyer, right?" And I was kind of offended, but then it settled in, and I was back to being silly. Um, so, what was I gonna tell you? One last thing about interoception. Oh, man, I might have lost it in my little sidetrack. Hang on, I'm pausing while I think of it. I got it. I got it. I remembered. Okay. So the last little thing I'll say is that there are some kids that are kind of tricky. They can tell you every emotion, they can tell you how they feel, they can tell you everything. And the problem is they can't access the language when they're dysregulated. So they are smart, they get it, they've learned it, but when they're dysregulated, they can't access it. So what you have to do is, I mean, what experts say you have to do is you have to teach it, of course, when they're regulated and ready to learn. And then you have to give them very, very basic skills like visuals and simple sentences to use when they're dysregulated so that they can use them, right? So you practice these things, even though what you're practicing is really elementary for them, so that when they are not feeling well, they can use the skills and strategies that are super easy, and those then become replacement behaviors. Remember, replacement behaviors have to be more effective and more efficient, and so they can access them in that moment. Okay, that is what I have to teach you about executive functioning, interoception, and less than the amount of time it takes me to paint my nails because I still got to do this top set. But I might actually go look at them under the light to see how this went in my dark office. Okay. Have a great week. I'll see you next week. Same time, same place.